All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started here. So for those of you who I haven't met before, my name is Keith. I'm a clinical specialist for Bunnell, old school RT, used the jet for many, many years. Been coming here off and on for years as well, and offering just every now and then some little jet tidbits and insights on how to take care of our little babies and how to save them and how to send them home with mom and dad with as less lung injury as possible. And so what I'd like to do today here is kind of go over just kind of maybe a review of some of our patient management guidelines, some stuff that you already know, but I think also some new stuff that you might really kind of take to heart a little bit more. I call it being better at the bedside. And the reason behind that is because so much of what we do with the jet, I think, is we wait and we see, like we make a change. And then we wait for the blood gas. And we wait to see if the blood gas is any better. And sometimes the same thing with oxygenation. So what are some of the things that we can look at point of care, though, at the bedside, to know that these changes that we're implementing and some of the things that we're going to be doing is going to truly make a difference here? And so that's kind of the journey that I want us to go on today. But this is very much a two-way conversation here, okay? Because you're going to have questions, and I need you to ask those questions here. I need you to think back, hey, we had that one kid on that one time, and he was back there in whatever bed, and he had this, and we did this, and it didn't make sense, or whatever have you. That's what we're here for, is to kind of hash it out and have this kind of open-ended type discussion about everything. So that's what we're going to run through today. And just a basic review of what the jet ventilator is. One of the things that I think is very important for us, again, kind of at the bedside, is to recognize that this little jet adapter, the life port adapter, this right here is actually what creates the jet breaths. This is what makes the jet a jet. The little box that sits in the bed with the patient, that's just a simple flow interrupter. But once that flow of gas and those tiny pulses go through the adapter, it goes through a little restriction here, and then it turns downward and gets squirted straight down the ET tube to the patient from there. And so if you take a little flow of gas, a little volume of gas, you deliver it very, very quickly. As you speed it up, it creates what's called flow streaming. And that's the type of gas velocity profile that we're after with using the jet ventilator. But that's all cool, but here's the really other cool thing about the adapter, okay? On the other side of the adapter is the pressure monitoring port, okay? So this is monitoring your airway pressure. It connects to the adapter down here past the delivery point here at the jet gas. And so the most proximal port to the ET tube itself, to the gas going down to the patient, is the pressure monitoring line that you see on the jet. And so when you see those monitored pressures up there, you see the PIP and you see the PEEP and all that type of stuff, that's about as accurate as it's going to get. You know, sometimes, you know, there's a discrepancy between maybe what's said on a conventional ventilator, like maybe PEEP, and what the jet's reading. Well, which one do you believe? Well, unless this is clogged or something like that, there's no reason not to believe the jet. You know, what you're getting with the conventional ventilator is a circuit pressure out here. You know, that's biased gas flow and all that type of stuff. This is monitoring what's actually going down the tube. There's a difference between here and here. So when the jet's reading, especially like the PEEP, sometimes it'll read a little bit less. You're getting what the jet's actually offering, you know. But then for us as RTs, that's also a great point of troubleshooting. You know, whenever we see weird pressure fluctuations and things don't match up the way that we think we should, we need to look at the pressure monitoring line here that connects to the patient box and kind of take a closer look at the adapter to make sure there isn't an occlusion or something. You can see it is pretty easy if I'm suctioning or something like that, or have my throat oysters, that it could easily clog up one of these, easily clog up the little port here, and then maybe that's causing some issues and problems there. So, you know, so at the bedside, that's one of the things that you can look at in troubleshooting, especially if we don't see the pressures doing what we need them to do on the jet. And of course, here's the jet flow streaming gas profile, where the gas gets squirted down the middle of the airways very quickly. Exhalation occurs around the gas that's incoming, and that's what it creates there. So, all right. So as far as when to use the jet and what kind of patients the jet would be most helpful on, you know, here you guys have used the jet for many years. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide here, but number two here is the one is certainly the growing use of the jet ventilator. Across the nation, as these small baby units are opening up, and we're rescuing 23 weekers and 24 weekers, the idea of true lung protective strategy of if you have to intubate them, being absolutely as gentle as possible, putting them on a jet and sitting back and just letting them grow is kind of becoming the deal. And it's I think it's very, very beneficial. And so, back when, of course, when I first started using the jet, it was all about number one, like treating PIE and treating pneumos and treating kids who were really messed up. And the jet was thought of more as a rescue mode type ventilator, but now it's a true kind of prophylactic. How we've learned to treat these types of kids, and we start the process earlier and earlier and earlier, we're going to start to prevent lung injury rather than just treat it down the road there. So, so here's a whole list of other kids that I think would really benefit from being on the jet. And of course, number 6, when everything else fails, if you don't know what else the hell to do, it's always a great reason to pull out the jet. It is pure rescue mode at that point because it is so much different than anything else out there. It may work. It may not work, but at least we're trying. At least we're giving it a shot to do so. Here are just some references that I often like to use there. So, okay, so why isn't the jet working for us and doing what we need it to do? I used to have the slide that said, what are the 2 main reasons the jet's not working for you? Not 2 as in TWO, but 2 as in TOO. 1, we wait way too late to get it started. We wait until the patient has lung injury and has this type of disease process to where you put them on any ventilator. I don't know that's going to help that much, but and that's kind of one. And then the other thing too is weaning too fast. Often it kind of seems we put a kid on the jet, we finally get a good gas, and then we start working to get them off the jet as quickly as possible. And it's like, no, this is the machine that's working. This is what these lungs need. We need to kind of chill out and let him rest, and let the baby maybe grow a little bit while being on the most gentle ventilation that we can. And the idea is to extubate, but not get them off the jet. What's the point of going to a conventional if you're going back to a rate of 30 and high pips, things like that. So these are the kind of the 2 things that over the years as I've visited many hospitals that kind of pop up here. And then we'll discuss number 3 here with lung volumes and stuff like that, with urinary pressure, and we can get into operation here in a minute. Okay, so when using the jet with a conventional ventilator, you really just need to simplify it, okay? And the conventional vent is all about oxygenation and lung volume. If you've got an oxygenation problem, you'll touch the conventional vent. If you have lung volume issue with regards to atelectasis, you'll touch the conventional ventilator there. CO2 problems it's all the jet problems, okay? And so the jet just puts in that tiny puffs of gas, and it just controls CO2, and that's it. That's all that it does, okay? And so I know it's got a lot of numbers on the screen and a lot of stuff to look at, but simplify it for what it really does, really is. Don't make it more complicated than this. And so when using the 2 vents, draw a line down the middle. If you got a CO2 problem, you're going to touch the jet. If you got an oxygenation problem, you'll touch the conventional. Don't try to treat one or the other. Is there crossover? Sure. Okay, here's a perfect example. You have a high CO2 because we've got atelectasis. Well, okay. In that case, I can go up on the jet all I want. It's not going to fix the atelectasis, and it's not going to fix the CO2. In that case, I have to use the conventional ventilator to recruit my lung back. Then the jet will come in and take care of the CO2. Okay, so there's an example where there's crossover, but for the most part, if you just kind of separate the 2 vents and approach it very simply like that way, it works out very, very well too. And why do we have to use a conventional ventilator? And this is Dr. Brand, one of my he still is one of my good friends and mentors over the years, and he's the one who taught me the value of using the conventional ventilator. I used to not kind of give the conventional ventilator its credit. It's due. It's all about the jet. No, actually, the only reason the jet is successful is based on how successful we are with the conventional ventilator first, right? And he's the one who kind of really taught me all about that. And one of the things that we take to heart is, and why we use a conventional ventilator is because there are things you can do with large volumes that you can't do with high frequency volumes, like recruit atelectasis. We'll jump on in a minute. So the primary roles of your conventional ventilator are number one, first and foremost, PEEP, which is mean airway pressure. You dial in your PEEP on the conventional, and what you're really after here is targeting your mean airway pressures with your patients. Okay, PEEP is just the knob you're going to turn to get the mean to go where you need it to be. We'll talk more about that in just a minute here. The conventional ventilator gives those larger volumes for lung recruitment type breaths. And number three is often overlooked. You know, we want our baby breathing on his own. We want him to breathe spontaneously. And the gas that's supplied from the conventional ventilator, that biased gas flow, is going to be enough to support him. The jet does not do that. You know, it doesn't matter what settings you're on the jet. It doesn't provide enough gas flow to meet the baby's inspiratory demands and meet his needs. Okay, and so we want to make sure that the baby has enough support coming from the conventional there. All the exhaled gas goes out through the conventional ventilator circuit here, but that's really what I'm looking at there. So let's first talk about optimizing PEEP and mean airway pressure. We have to understand that mean airway pressure is generated differently in all machines. How you get to this mean airway pressure is different. But nevertheless, it's the bottom line with regards to lung volume. It's the bottom line with regards to oxygenation. Okay, and so when we're on a conventional ventilator and we're giving, you know, a larger PIP, a much longer inspiratory time, you know, to maintain a mean of 12, let's say, your baby only needs to be on a PEEP of 5 or 6, not a lot at all. Okay, but when you switch to the little pitter patter of the jet and you go to the tiny volumes, the short I times, and all that type of stuff there, in order to maintain the same mean airway pressure, you have to raise your baseline up. Okay, when you start using high frequency ventilators, you know, it doesn't matter what ventilator, there's two things that must be raised. One, you've got to raise the rate, obviously, because you drive your tidal volume so tiny. And two, your overall distending pressure or mean airway pressure, however you want to phrase it, that must also be raised in order to reduce airways resistance, reduce the impedance of the effective delta P delivery with high frequency. So what I mean by that is if I'm on a PEEP of 5 or 6 on a conventional ventilator and I decide to go to a jet, then I'm going to be on a PEEP of like 9 or 10. Okay, and that's not a bad thing. Is going from, you know, 6 to 9 a bad thing? No, it means you're maintaining status quo. My mean is 12 on both machines. It's just now I'm on high frequency, so now I need a slightly higher distending pressure to maintain that same mean airway pressure. You know? So going from 6 to 9 is not a bad thing. It's maintaining exactly what I need to maintain. And this is a really good kind of keep in your back pocket lesson for when you're transitioning patients to the jet. Okay, whether you're coming from an oscillator to a jet or even the conventional to the jet. I realize that chances are you're going to the jet because you want lower mean airway pressures because he's overinflated on X-ray. I get all that. That's cool. Just don't start there. That's the point. See, whenever we have to get the jet started, we have to break the circuit because we got to put in the jet adapter. We get everything connected, we press enter on the jet, but it's starting from a pressure of 0. You're going to lose some lung volume and you're going to lose some of that support. Okay. So up front, one of the kind of easy things to do to prevent your patient from decompensating when you first get the jet started is to just match mean airway pressures up front and then titrate down to where you want to be. But don't start them off where you want to be because it will be too low. And that's kind of one of the things with the jet. I hear quite often and have experienced it quite often is we love using the jet once somebody else has already done the hard work of getting it going, okay, which means getting it started. And time and time again, the hardest part about getting the jet started is that it always seems that the patient decompensates when you first get the jet going, and then you fight this uphill battle. This will take care of that. Don't start them out low and fight to work your way up. Start him off high and then bring him down to where you want him to be there. And so that's where this comes into play with this rule of thumb here that I've used for over 20 years of using the jet. The jet running at its default settings only contributes about 3 of the mean airway pressure, total mean airway pressure. So if you're targeting if you're targeting a mean of 12 and the jet's putting in 3 of that 12, what's your optimal PEEP? 9. Not 7, not 11, 9. And you can very easily get right there at the bedside to the point you want to be at. It's not about what PEEP you should be on. It's about what mean airway pressure you want to be on. And so even after your patient's on the jet and been on the jet for a while, what is his happy place mean airway pressure? Know that at a mean of 12, things are great. FiO2 is low, sats are awesome, fantastic. And know that that's your target, okay? And then when we start playing with other settings that may affect the mean airway pressure, you may have to come back to the mean and adjust PEEP up by 1 or something like that to get your mean back to where it's supposed to be. For instance, the jet rate. These are at the default settings. The jet puts in about 3. But if my patient's overinflated in gas trapping, a great strategy that we should do is lower the jet rate down to get longer exhalation times. Perfect. Well, if I lower this down to 360 or even 300, now the jet's not contributing 3 anymore to the mean airway pressure. It's only contributing 2 or maybe 1.5. So now to get your mean of 12, you may have to go to a PEEP of 10 to get it. Okay, and that's exactly what you should do. Okay, but the thing is, recognize how very little, if you will, the jet contributes to the mean. It contributes a little bit, but it really emphasizes how important PEEP is. And when you're trying to figure out how much PEEP to use, the real question is what mean airway pressure do you want to be on? From that, you'll very easily figure out what PEEP you need to go to. So, how high is too high of PEEP? What numbers? A PEEP of 10 sound like a lot. A PEEP of 11. Well, to me, it's based on the patient. If I reach the point of hemodynamic compromise with the patient, I see the heart rate go up, okay, then that's his limit. Blood pressure drop, that's his limit. But you've got to let the baby tell you that, right? We're more afraid to turn that knob from 8 to 9 than the baby is. I know. Okay, PEEP at 9 sounds like a lot. In a lot of hospitals I visited, if I say this baby needs a PEEP at 9, it's like, wow, sirens go off, red flags. People jump out of windows. I want to put a baby on a PEEP at 9, right? But if your mean is only 12, what are you worried about? If he's on an oscillator, he's on a mean of 16. Nobody cares about that. He'd be maxed out on volume. Nobody cares. But we're worried about a PEEP of 9. Well, that's because we're focusing way too much on this number when we really need to be dissecting this number and getting that to work. So sure, as I use the jet more or less for CO2 control, and even as I use the conventional ventilator, whether I'm using a background rate or not, all of that does affect the mean airway pressure. The point is when you get to a good, happy spot, you make note of what that mean is and say, oh, that's your target. And then you can adjust PEEP as necessary to keep your mean where it's supposed to be. So, yeah, it's a really cool rule of thumb that works out pretty well. And using the background breaths to recruit the lung, the whole point here on the conventional ventilator is to apply enough pressure to get past that critical opening pressure to finally pop open the alveoli. And the thing is when you have atelectasis, a lot of times you can't just increase PEEP. PEEP is on the bottom end of the curve. PEEP prevents de-recruitment. It doesn't recruit. What recruits is this big breath coming in from the conventional. Now, when everything it works well together, this is where high frequency is most efficient, where the bottom part of the delta P is just at or just above your PEEP level. But you can see here that if I'm looking at, I've got atelectasis, that even if I increase PEEP or increase my mean up, it doesn't mean I'm getting over here to the COP to actually recruit the lung. So that's where, of course, the background rate comes into play with the conventional. Whether you're on a rate of 3 or a rate of 5 or something like that, that's why we're going to use the background rate. But the thing we have to keep in mind is that the background rate on the conventional ventilator are large volumes going in. They're not high frequency volumes. So we have to be careful. We have to be gentle. We can't overdo it. I want to put in enough to get the job done, but I certainly don't want to create more lung injury. I certainly don't, here every time the conventional gives a breath, we know those large volumes are going straight out my missing balloon here in the hole. But the high frequency breaths leave the hole alone, and we're still ventilating those parts of the lung over here. And we want to make sure we're not getting that lung injury or making PIE worse or my gas trapping worse. And that's kind of where the trick comes in as far as where do I set that conventional ventilator PIP? So I've got atelectasis, oxygenation is not so great. So let's use the background rate to recruit the lung. Cool. Where do I set that PIP? Does it have any relationship to the jet PIP? So years ago, I was taught it did. I was taught that the conventional PIP always had to be 2 below the jet PIP. Steve was telling me he was taught it had to be 2 above the jet PIP. And we've heard it all from one way to which or the other. The fact of the matter is this, guys. They are 2 vents that do 2 separate things. They don't need to be related whatsoever. The 2 PIPs do 2 completely different things. Okay. What I'm worried about most with the conventional is that if I dial in a PIP of 22, the lungs are going to see a PIP of 22 or 28 or whatever you dial in. And that's what I'm worried about with my conventional side breath. Am I getting to that lung injury zone? Here's kind of the way that I look at it here. The discussion I had not too long ago with the neonatology group down in Phoenix, and we were talking about the side breaths, and one of the neonatologists there, she said to me, she said, but if I'm at pressures of 21/7, that's not very high at all. Does it sound? Well, you're right. I mean, if you look at a PIP of 21, not very high. A PIP of 7, not too bad. But what's your delta P? 13. You actually might be putting in more volume and having more shearing forces, shearing pressure at a delta P of 13. And so if you look at the settings by themselves, I'm at 21/7, that doesn't sound bad, but what is the change of pressure with that delta P? You are probably putting in more than our 5 cc's per kilo that we like to put in at a delta P of 13, right? Because the conventional ventilator is not sustaining ventilation, the jet is. We just need to put in just enough to pop open the alveoli. That's all that we need to do, And so here, here's kind of our typical conventional ventilator breath. We had kind of a shorter inspiratory time, 0.35, 0.4 seconds. We dial in the PIP and kind of like what would be a normal PIP for a baby that size, and that's something that I taught for many, many years. But I've learned from Dr. Jonathan Klein at the University of Iowa and a few others that maybe we can change our strategy here to be a little bit more gentle with these backup breaths. So instead of delivering a high pressure fast, the problem with that is you deliver a high pressure, gas of course goes to the parts of the lung already open because we're delivering it so quickly. But instead of a high pressure delivered fast, maybe deliver a lower peak pressure over a longer period of time, a sustained inflation there. The allostatic parts of the lung, their pulmonary time constants are very long because we have to open them up. Okay, when you blow up a balloon, you don't blow hard and fast. It's a nice, slow, gentle, inflation. For me as an RT, when I'm teaching somebody how to use like an MDI inhaler or something, it's slow and easy in. It's not quick and fast. Okay, and so this way, if we keep our what Dr. Klein has been teaching, which I think is pretty good, is what conventional PIP do you put your baby on? Well, PEEP plus 8. Whatever your PEEP level is, add 8 to it. That should be good enough to get a nice little chest movement. And what it guarantees is this: that even if you have to make a PEEP adjustment, we're still not hitting that lung injury zone up here. And so no matter how you adjust your PEEP level, you have that same delta P. You're not putting in too much, you're not putting in too little. If you're not impressed with the chest movement at that PEEP plus 8, then go to PEEP plus 10. But the idea is to keep it modest, keep it effective, but gentle. And then when you're having problems with oxygenation with these patients, and especially those who may have you've been on a background rate, but the atelectasis still isn't going away, this is a strategy that we often use, and it's very successful. Okay, so instead of a high pressure for a short period of time, do that lower pressure, PEEP plus 8 to start with. But yes, I'm talking about extending the I time out to a half second, 0.75, even 1 second, which sounds like a lot for the NICU, but you're only on a rate of 3. You're only on a rate of 5, maybe. Okay, so for 5 seconds out of a whole minute, you're in inspiration. Okay, it's not, you're fine with that. It's just that nice, gentle breath in as opposed to this blasting out. You think you're delivering 5 cc's per kilo with this breath, but the allostatic parts of the lung that are all shut off, you're delivering 10 cc's per kilo to the other parts of the lung that are already open. That's the problem. So, And so how you normally approach your side breaths, I think y'all do normally kind of use just your 0.4, I think, or 0.35, I think, or so. And that's okay. But I'm just saying, keep your mind open to a different way of doing things too. If you're not getting to where you want to be, you're using your current method and your current strategy. Think about using this strategy, and you'll get the positive results that you're after here. But I've really taken to teaching this. I like this a lot better. I used to always just say conventional PIP. What's a normal PIP for a baby that size? 18, and I don't think that's wrong, but I do think that this is better, and I do think that it's more gentle. So instead of a high pressure fast, think low pressure over a long period of time. Here too, And so the whole thing, of course, with the conventional ventilator is, and with those breaths, is to use them when you need to and don't when you don't. Ideally, we want CPAP we don't want any large volumes going in, but they're there if you need it. So use them when you need to recruit atelectasis back. Use the background breaths when maybe after doing some cares, after doing suction, the patient's just desaturating and not coming back to baseline. It's fine. Use the background rate for 10 minutes, for 15 minutes. Do a temporary lung recruitment maneuver, but then turn it off afterwards. You can't leave it on all night because then our X-ray tomorrow will be really hyperextended. All right, so now that we got oxygenation out of the way, let's dive a little bit more into the jet. And what you have to remember is when you dive into the world of high frequency, our CO2 elimination from the body changes a little bit. Normally we're accustomed to our CO2 elimination being equivalent to our minute volume. That's normal tidal ventilation. But with high frequency, your CO2 elimination is proportional to rate times tidal volume squared. Okay? And actually it's times tidal volume squared times K, but we can't ever really calculate what this mysterious K constant is. So we just kind of short it to that. But the key point here is rate times tidal volume squared. And so what essentially that means is that any change that I make to my tidal volume delivery with high frequency will have a much, much more profound effect over CO2 than changing the rate everywhere. That's pretty much all that means. And so how do we change the volume on the jet to blow off CO2? Well, the first thing that we always do is the jet PIP. That's your primary control for CO2. It creates a delta P, right? And delta P creates a change of pressure, creates a change of volume. Change of volume blows off CO2. There you go. And that's where the servo pressure is going to come into play. Even though you don't control servo pressure, we're going to watch it and trend it and track it. We'll talk about that in a second. And then the other thing that you can do to increase volume delivery is to increase the jet inspiratory time. Okay. And this is the fun one where we have all sorts of awesome questions. So we'll jump into all of that. But first, let's deal with the basic primary control for the jet being the PIP. Okay. And so the thing you have to remember is that this is a high frequency PIP. I wish on the jet, we could label it something other than PIP, because I think that freaks some clinicians out. I think they look at it and they're like, oh my gosh, it's like a conventional PIP. It's not. It's a high frequency PIP, which means there's tremendous pressure attenuation as that applied pressure goes down to the lungs. That's why high frequency is safe. Same phenomenon takes place with an oscillator. Your applied amplitude just greatly diminishes as it works its way down the airways. Okay, and so what we often say is that the lungs see less than 10% of what's actually dialed in. Okay, and so so if you're dialed in at a jet PIP of 30, I mean the lungs are seeing 3. Okay, so even 40, lungs are seeing 4. So don't be afraid of the jet PIP. If you have a baby that's got some stiff lungs, your PIPs on the jet are going to be in the 30s, mid-30s, maybe even 40, and that's fine. That's just what it needs to get chest movement. Okay, because just keep in mind how much the pressure really, really does drop. Now, one other thing that's very interesting is PEEP is held constant throughout the airways with the jet. So as your amplitude decreases, the overall mean airway pressure actually drops as it gets down here to the distal airways and the alveoli. So in other words, your mean down here is actually a little bit less than what's dialed in up here. It's probably closer to your PEEP level once it hits down here. Okay, and so if I have, like, let's say I have an oscillator on a mean of 15 and the jet on a mean of 15, the lungs are actually saying less mean with the jet. Because on an oscillator, mean is held constant throughout the airways, but on the jet, peak is held constant. Mean actually declines there too. So, yeah, it's just kind of one of those things where you take a closer look at what that PIP is doing, and realizing that it's not, that number itself is not. Don't be afraid of the number. Like I said, if you've got to go to a PIP of 30, it's fine. Jet PIP of 30, of course. PIP of 35, if that's what you need, then cool, do it. Okay. But what we're really after when we manipulate the jet PIP to blow off CO2 is a change in the servo. Okay. Now, this is the definition of the servo. It's a driving pressure. It's the driving pressure required to get to your PIP. Okay. We normally think of servo pressure also as a feedback mechanism from the baby to me. It can give me an idea of what's going on with his pulmonary dynamics. If lung compliance is improving and I've got more volume to fill, servo pressure is just going to go up on its own because it's got to fill the volume, and awesome. Does the baby need suctioning? We'll look at the servo pressure. If it's less than what it normally is, then yeah, he probably needs to be suctioned. Okay. And so we think of servo pressure as giving us ideas of what's going on with the patient, and it is. But here's how you're going to use it to be a better clinician for that patient. Okay. So to kind of go back to what servo pressure is, I want you to think of it not necessarily as a pressure. It is a driving pressure, but I want you to think of it more as flow, because that's what it is. It's the gas flow going through the circuit. With any ventilator, if I dial in a certain PIP, I have to have enough gas flow to hit that PIP, right? If I don't have enough flow, I'll never hit that peak pressure. Well, that's what the servo is. That servo is the flow. It's the gas flow going through the jet circuit to meet the PIP that you're set at on the PIP. Okay. And sure, it does change with pulmonary dynamics. So, here's my current space, or my lung space, if you will. As space gets bigger, in order to maintain the same PIP in a bigger, more compliant lung, I've got to have more flow to fill it. And then it also does the opposite. If your kid's septic and he purrs, and the lungs shrink up into nothing. Okay? The jet doesn't have to work very hard to meet the PIP, so your required flow goes down. Okay, and it goes back and forth. And so it's kind of one of those things where it's definitely the feedback of the servo pressure is definitely what's going on with the patient. Okay, but here's how we can use it at the bedside to be better. When we have a high CO2, we go up on the jet PIP. Okay, normally we go up by what? 2? Okay, we go up by 2. How do you know that 2 is going to be enough? I mean, we hope it's enough. But how much? We wait for a blood gas, right? Okay, let's wait 30 minutes. Let's get a blood gas. Maybe an hour. Get blood gas. A lot of hospitals do T-columns. That's nice too. But you wait. Well, there's something that you can look at right now at point of care that tells you whether the change you made is worth it or not, and that's the servo pressure. See, when I go up on the jet PIP to create a larger delta P, I want to create a larger change of volume. Well, what on the jet represents volume delivered to the patient? Servo. Exactly. So when I go from 24 to 26, I expect to see my servo pressure go up. I've created a larger delta P. That is now, because I have a larger delta P, more flow is going through the jet circuit, which means more volume. Your CO2 should come down. Oops, I didn't mean to go back that far, I'm sorry. If you make a PIP change, but the servo doesn't change any, then you didn't do anything. You think you did something because you push buttons, but for your change of pressure, it didn't result in the jet giving a larger volume delivery, and therefore your CO2 is not going to come down. Okay, or maybe if it only just changes by 1/10, that's cute and all, but that's not going to bring the CO2 down. Okay, and so what I'll do is I'll come up to the bedside, and I'll say, okay, I'm going to make this PIP change. I'm going to blow off CO2. Right now, my number is 2.6. I'm going to make my PIP change, but when I'm done with that, I want that number to certainly be higher than what it is right now. Now, this is just years and years of experience of using the jet thing and treating kids clinically on the hotline and all the stuff that I do. Nothing's been studied or proven yet, but we're doing a study in the spring to show that we're right. But what you want to look for is at least a 0.3 change of your servo pressure. I call it servo pressure targeting. So right now I'm at 2.6. When I change my PIP, I want that to at least be a 2.9. That way I know the PIP change I made is going to actually make a difference or bring my CO2 down. Now you may have to go up on your PIP by 2, 3, 5, I don't know. You don't know. That's all based on the pulmonary dynamics of the patient, right? And it makes sense. If you're taking care of a bigger chronic lung baby whose airways are inflamed and beat up, you're going to have to make a pressure change by 4 or 5 on him because his lungs are crap. Right? But you're taking care of a little 25-weeker who's very nice and precious and gentle. You can go up by 2 on him and you won't have this problem. You won't have that pressure change thing. So it is dependent on the patient, of course, but what I do is I target the servo pressure and I'm like, I'm going to go up on the PIP, but whatever this is, I want this to at least be 0.3 higher than it is right now. And if it doesn't change or it only goes up by 0.1, you didn't do enough.
Is that kind of the average of? Because our servo pressures change a little bit on the. Yeah. I mean, they're never
the kids breathe
not static, so they're breathing. Yeah.
Yeah, and you saw.
So that's what what we're at on average, or more so than not, right?
Yeah, and so as you're watching it and it's fluctuating 0.1 up and down, you just kind of get your average. You know, but you saw that in the room earlier this morning. I was on a test lung and it fluctuated by 0.1 either way. And that's on a test lung. So now that it's actually on the baby, sure it goes wrong, but you just come up and you kind of get that. Servo pressure is everything. Servo pressure is it's how hard the jet's working to put in that PIP, but what that is volume. What that is your chest wiggle. What that is your CO2. What that is happiness. That's what that is. When you come to the bedside because the patient's decompensating and desaturating, that servo is not what it was before. It's way less than it was before. That's why you don't have chest wiggle, you know, and that's why we'll do our troubleshooting thing. You know, we'll reposition. You know, maybe the ET tube, the bevels against the tracheal wall or something, and then you just twist it a little bit. Boom, chest wiggle again. Servo pressure goes back up to where it's supposed to be. So you know, earlier we were talking about loving and targeting your mean airway pressure. Do the same thing with the servo. Know that, hey, at 2.9, my baby's in a great spot. I got good gases. I've got good chest wiggle. This is my number I need to get to. Okay. And then, like I said, later on when stuff happens, and you come in and he's desaturating, that number's not 2.9 anymore. It's 2.3. Okay, reposition, suction, do whatever. No, number goes right back to 2.9. But you know exactly what number it needs to get to. And then in our case here of making a pressure change to blow off CO2, I come up, my baseline's 2.6 or 3.0, whatever the number is, it doesn't matter. But I know that at the end of my change here, I want that to at least be 0.3 to know that I made a significant enough change to bring down the CO2. Now, if your CO2s are just in the mid-50s and you want them just a little bit lower, okay, that's a 1/10 change. Okay, that's it. But listen, if they're in mid-60s and 70s and even higher, I mean, now don't get me wrong, if they're in the 90s, 4 change. Okay, but my point is this saves time. This saves blood gases because often this is what we do. We make a change by 2. We wait 30 minutes to get a blood gas. So maybe we'll go up by 1 more on the PIP. Maybe we do nothing. Let's wait another hour and get another blood gas. It's still not much better. Well, let's go up by 1 more here. Let's wait another hour, get another blood gas, right? Look, 6 hours later, 6 blood gases later, you may finally get to where you could have been first thing this morning had we been targeting the servo pressure. And so that's coming. So with your blood gases, I want to know what the servo pressure is with those blood gases. You know, in like maybe the free notes section of blood gases or something, or I don't know, like you said, you're redoing Epic, maybe you can put that in. But I want to know that because when the CO2 is high, it's not because that's high, it's because that's way low. And then you know what number you've got to get back to get that CO2 back under control. And so servo pressure really, really, especially right there at point of care, can tell you so much. You know, I know that it changed enough to bring down the CO2. Now, by how much, I don't know. I don't know that. But I know it's going to be coming down because I saw change the PIP, servo doesn't do anything, then you didn't do anything. And either you got to go up more on the PIP to get the servo to change, or maybe we need to do some long recruitment breaths or something. But managing that expectations is what we should really do. But let's talk about the rate though, because the rate does play with our minute ventilation. It does have something to do with it. And the thing about using rates with high frequency, and you get into the idea of using the corner resonant frequency and being optimized, what that is just energy synchronization. The energy of the gas coming in, the tissues, all that type of stuff, that's kind of really what all this means. And so it is very important to dial in the right rate for the pathophysiology that you're treating. Not dial in the right rate to treat a CO2 blood gas, but the right rate for my tissues, my lung tissues that you're trying to treat. And so that's kind of where I know the default setting here is right here in the middle at 420, which is kind of in the middle, and it does all sorts of stuff. But don't try to control the blood gas with the CO2. Try to control your X-ray with the rate. If you're overinflated in gas trapping, ask a simple yes or no question. Would my patient benefit from a longer exhalation time? Yes or no? That's it. If the answer is yes, then lowering the jet rate is a good idea. Or being at a low jet rate already is a good idea. If lung volume looks good, then don't change the rate. Okay. Don't change the rate to try to chase the CO2. This is a trap so many people fall into. They'll go up to 480 and listen, your blood gas in 20 minutes will be great. I'm not worried about your blood gas in 20 minutes. I'm worried about your blood gas in 4 hours or 6 hours when your lungs are way overinflated and you're retaining CO2 a lot more now. Okay? And so you've got to treat the disease process with the rate. Treat the X-ray with the rate. Don't treat the blood gas with the rate. And like I said, if you really simplify it, if you really just look at your lung volume and just ask that yes or no question, would my patient benefit from a longer E time? Yes or no? Answer is yes. Lowering the jet rate's a good strategy move. Or if you're already at like a rate of 300, then be like, okay, cool. I'm already at a low jet rate. I've just reaffirmed that I have the right strategy dialed in. Okay. Can you go to 240? Sure, you can. But the little babies we take care of nowadays don't tolerate 240. It's actually too slow. So I love the idea of getting longer exhalation times, but you can actually go too slow for these little, like 25, 26 weekers. And so that's the idea here. And will I go up on the jet rate? Sure. If I'm taking care of a very small, stiff lung, small volume, yeah. But I think for the most part with the jet, you'll either sit pretty right here at 420 or be at 360 or 300. And that's kind of that's the idea with the rate. Now, if you lower the rate, does it affect your minute ventilation? Sure, of course it does. It has to. But there's the numerical answer, and then there's the clinical answer. Numerically, yes. As I lower the jet rate, my overall CO2 elimination does drop. That's the numerical equation. But you're taking care of a kid who's 10 ribs and flat diaphragms. That's the clinical answer. So you can't just run with this at all the time. I've come across a few facilities who were using lower rates when they really didn't need to, but they were wondering why their jet pips were in the 30s and 35 for a little tiny baby to maintain their CO2. Well, this is why. I mean, because you lower the rate when you really didn't need to. You did lower your overall CO2 elimination, but now to make up for it, you had to crank up the jet pip to compensate for it.
So in almost all of our movies, they're using the jet. Almost all of them, but 80% they all have to do it. And we're not, most of the times we're operating the jet. Right?
Do so.
Yeah, but I think it's a position.
Well, here's the thing. This is always a great place to start. So for your little 25-weeker that comes out, get started on the jet right away. Awesome. After a few days, we start to see the overinflation. Okay, go to 360. If you've been at 360 for a few days and it's still there, and to be honest with you, it will still be there, then go down to 300. Or if you're okay at 360, stay at 360. But the jet rate is a slow and steady wins the race mentality type strategy. Okay. my soapbox that I'll get on a little bit for our babies now is of course over the years, now that we are rescuing and saving and treating smaller and smaller and smaller babies, the more premature they are. Okay, you have to manage your expectations, I guess is what I'm looking at. It is unrealistic to think that a 25-weeker is going to have 8.5 ribs and dome diaphragms. You can be as gentle as possible. You can be on the lowest jet settings and the lowest PEEP in the whole 9 yards. You will still have gas trapping because that's the baby we're taking care of. Now, if he's 28 weeks and weighs 800 grams, okay, then that's different. Maybe I can start pushing for that x-ray then. But it really gets to me how we try to put these normal x-rays on these babies that are so far from being normal. And so the managing the idea and the expectation of you are going to gas trap, period. It's not an if. You are going to on that little preemie like that. Just dial in the right strategy, sit back, let the baby grow, and go there. And I think sometimes that's where you'll dial in these good settings. You'll be at a good spot. CO2 will be awesome. Oxygenation's awesome. Overall, the overall picture of the little baby we're taking care of, it looks really good. And then dadgummit, somebody gets an x-ray. Look at the x-ray. Well, 10 ribs. Let me just turn PEEP down by 1. And next thing you know, we're lost. White out over here. FiO2 is 100%. It's that type of thing there. And so until they grow and gain and weigh more and the tissue matures more, they're going to overinflate. And so looking at the big picture, the X-ray is of course a wonderful tool, but we also have to look at the big picture of the patient's care in total, and not just for because that 25-weeker, he is going to be overinflated and he is going to gas trap until down the road. Then we can start working towards that. But the only thing we can do is dial this in, and like I said, even if it's just a pat on the back of, yeah, I've got the right strategy dialed in. Then that's all you need. Then sit tight and do nothing. And I think that sometimes, doing nothing is doing something. I don't have to touch a knob and push a button every single time I look at the kid. I think sometimes, well, I know some hospitals I visit, they always touching things like that too. And so, but let's apply that numerical equation now to the tidal volume. Remember, we said rate times tidal volume squared. So I just picked, the jet delivers less than 1 cc per kilo, less than 1 mil. So I just picked 0.7 as a fun number to start with. But you can see here that if anything I do to increase my volume delivery from the jet, whether I go up on my jet PIP and create a slightly larger servo pressure, or maybe I extend the I time out, even if I increase my volume delivery by 1/10 or 2/10 of a cc, look at that tremendous change and increase you get in your CO2 elimination. That's why the PIP and the I time, but the PIP primarily is your primary control for CO2. Don't chase those CO2s with the rate. Chase the X-ray with the rate. Chase the CO2s with the jet PIP, because you get so much more for the small change that you're making. All right, what about this I time? Because historically, we've never changed the jet I time. And I remember years ago coming here and teaching, never changed the I time. I remember having a grand round session over at St. Mary's and having all sorts of wonderful discussions about all this stuff. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Wonderful discussions. So here's the thing. We take care of kids that aren't linear. We take care of kids that in some areas are more analytic than others and more compliant than others and more resistant than others and the whole 9 yards. Okay, and so sometimes, though, we have to pay closer attention to matching the inspiratory pulmonary time constants. Now, everything with the jet, everything we love about the jet, it's always about the expiratory time, right? That's why we love lowering the jet rate and getting the longer ID ratios. But have we been overlooking the inspiratory time of the jet? Well, I think so. I think so. The story behind it really is, why at that 0.02, why have we never changed it, or why have we never really, over the years of using the jet, suggested? Well, that's because from a fluid dynamics point of view, you take that small volume of gas, you deliver it very quickly. The more quickly you can deliver it, the more the gas is able to maintain the cool jet flow streaming in the airways, right? If you slow down that gas delivery, the gas becomes more turbulent and it's not as efficient. So based like on the mathematical models that Dr. Bunnell ran years ago and all that type of stuff, for us at Bunnell, including myself, we were so enamored with the shortest eye time out here and doing it out here through the adapter and all that stuff. We were so enamored with that's what's best out here to deliver the jet gas. But is that what's best for the baby to receive the gas down here? Different question, different answer there, right? And so we have to realize that, that we take care of kids and they have different pulmonary time constants there. And, we have, I don't have it on this slide here, but I have another slide somewhere where I talk about the pulmonary time constants for a patient that has air leaks, which is PIE or a pneumo or something, So the affected part of the lung, the part of the lung that has an air leak, usually its time constant is around anywhere from 50 to, I believe, 70 or 80 milliseconds, if I'm not mistaken. So in other words, if you're delivering an inspiratory time longer than 50 milliseconds, you could be incurring more lung injury. That's what that's implying. So what is the jet right out of the box at default? 20 milliseconds, that's it, at 0.02. By just kind of serendipity and pure luck, the jet at its default eye time is so short, that's why it heals PIE, that's why it heals air leaks, that's why it reduces the gas trapping, and you don't really have to touch the eye time at all because it's already just at that default setting to do so. Well, that's great, but sometimes 0.02 is too fast. Okay. So when you start talking about time constants in the lungs and all the different things, to me, kind of the key words here of patients that would benefit from a longer inspiratory time is inflammation, pneumonia-type processes, things like that. Think about it. Airways are inflamed. Chronic lung-type kids, airways are inflamed, which means the restriction is high. And if my airways and my tubes are smaller and resistance is high, then your required time constants to effectively deliver the gas from downstream go up. In other words, 0.02 is too fast for his lungs. It may be perfectly fine for a 25-weeker, but for these other kids who have these resistance type issues, like I said, the chronic lung, inflamed area, and this is what you're after. You know that as the delta P travels down the airways, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Well, when it sees areas of increased resistance, the applied delta pressure just plateaus off, it falls off the map. It doesn't really get down here because you saw high resistance. But if you're delivering a longer inspiratory time, here your effective delta P delivery is only getting down this far. But with the longer inspiratory time, your effective delta P delivery is getting out this far. I didn't change the PIP. All I did was change the eye time. I'm giving it more time. So as gas flow goes through a tube, you apply a driving pressure. Gas flow moves through the tube, but you reach a point to where the gas flow through your tube or airway plateaus off. And it doesn't matter how high you go on your driving pressure. It's plateaued off. At that point in time, it's not a pressure issue. It's a time issue. You've got to give more time for the gas to get down to where it needs to go. So you kind of think of like that chronic lung, kind of beat up lung type baby. Your jet pips are already in the high 30s, maybe even low 40s. Do you think if you're around a jet pip of 39, do you think going to 41 is going to help you out? No. That's because his lungs are, for that change of pressure, you're not going to get a change of volume. The external pressure is not going to change on that kid despite you going up on the pip. That's because it's not a pressure issue, it's a time issue. The higher the resistance of the lungs, the more time we have to give it for the gas and pressure to be delivered. So then the next question should be, and it is, but if I go up on my eye time, don't I lose my expiratory time? Well, yes, of course you do. Is it a big of a deal? No, it's not a big deal. We make it out to be a big deal, but it's not a big deal. Here's the reason why. What you don't know is this column right here on the jet. We know the eye time. Rate of 420, eye time is 0.02. The exhalation time is 122 milliseconds, okay? ID ratio 1 to 6. If I go up on my eye time from 0.02 to 0.026, and add 6 milliseconds, that's a 30% increase. And what's funny is that 6 milliseconds doesn't sound like a lot. You know how incredibly fast 6 milliseconds is? It's unreal. So it doesn't sound like a lot, but it is. You added 6 to 20, right? If you had $20 and I gave you $6, you just made 30%. Every investor in the world would take you up on that, right? Now, we added 6 milliseconds here, but let's take away 6 milliseconds from my exhalation time. I go to 116. It's only a change of 5%. But here's the thing. On the front of the jet, the IDE ratio goes from a 1 to 6 to a 1 to 4. If you look at that for face value, that looks like you lost a third of your exhalation time. But you didn't. You didn't come anywhere close. You only lost 5% of your exhalation time. To lose a third of your exhalation time here, you'd have to lose, 41 milliseconds. You didn't lose 41 milliseconds. You lost 6. Even if I max the jet out at 0.034, this is as high as the I time goes. Of course, that's a huge jump here in expiratory time. Take away from your E time, that's only an 11% change. But the IDE ratio on the jet goes from a 1 to 6 to a 1 to 3. So at the bedside, you change that, it goes from 1 to 3. Everybody's like, oh, we've lost half our exhalation time. You didn't come anywhere close to losing half your exhalation time. The IDE ratio changed, but it didn't. You did not lose that exhalation time. Okay. So the IDE ratio on the front of the jet is a little like my 15-year-old daughter. A little over dramatic and a little over the top with every little thing, every little change that happens. It's a bigger deal than what it really is. I'm sorry. I love her. But that's what you're looking at the bedside, and you can get thrown off by that. Okay. So things like some from Dr. Jonathan Klein at University of Iowa and some of their guidelines that they've had, which are really nice reference points. I've visited with Dr. Klein and I love a lot of his stuff. I don't love everything that he does. I'm not saying he's wrong because I'm not going to argue with his results. But I am going to say that like with his protocol that you can pull up online and look at and stuff, I think there's some points to take from it. But he uses a lot of absolutes. He uses words like never and always and all this type of stuff, and that's just not the case. I believe he says in there, I have it on my laptop somewhere, but I believe he says on there, like, never go up on the jet I time because you're going to be giving pneumos. You're going to be blowing pneumos on the kid left and right. No, that's not true. I'm not going to be giving, especially on the jet. Now, on the conventional, if I'm using the conventional ventilator too much, yes, I can do a pneumo there. If I handbag out of control, yes, I can give a pneumo there. But doing this on the jet is not going to give an air leak. If my air leak time constant is again the range between 50 and 80 milliseconds, well, I'm only at 20. And here I'm only at 26. I'm still halfway to that point to which I could incur that.
So we had a baby recently that was on high PA and over 40 in the CO2 so I increased the inspector time. The CO2 came down beautifully, and we thought, okay, that's wonderful. It works. And then I came back a little bit later, and baby who had been 30%, like 60%. And when I was looking at the jet, my mean airway pressure was the same, but the peak at that longer inspiratory time was lower. I guess to keep the same mean airway pressure, the peak was lower. And
so when you first made the I time change on the jet, and that was the only change that was made,
yeah.
Great ventilation, better oxygenation too, right? Because increasing the I time on the jet increased the mean to begin with.
No, but we kept the mean the same. Yeah.
And then it came back down?
Well, they probably adjusted.
That's what I'm saying. We shouldn't have adjusted it.
Right.
I mean, in hindsight, it's always easy. So let it be. And that would have been the clue that, oh, he likes that one higher mean or whatever he was before because I did this. So the idea behind this is also, that actually brings up a really kind of good point. Improved oxygenation is secondary to your improvement in ventilation. This is not an oxygenation move. Oxygenation move is PEEP, stuff like that. But you got a bonus. But because you're turning over gas better and more efficiently out here, And because going up on the jet eye time does, remember I said the jet puts in 3? Well, if I go up on the eye time, the jet might be putting in 3.5 now, maybe 4. But because just mechanically it's delivering more mean airway pressure, you hit that sweet spot with your baby. That's probably, you know, in hindsight, we probably could have just said, leave well enough alone at that point and not bring me back down. Yeah. And so this thing, so how do I apply this? Now I put this other chart down here just at the low jet rate of 240 just to see that, you know, if you really, really want to extend the expiratory time back out, you can lower the jet rate down. You don't have to. Okay, I don't want anybody to think that just because I go up in the eye time, I have to lower the jet rate because I have to get that IDE or whatever back. You don't. Listen, exhalation, especially with the jet because it's passive, but exhalation is all about having a higher pressure gradient down here than what's up here, right? That's what moves gas. So if you're more efficient and effective on the inspiratory side of things, you will be better and more efficient on the exhalation side of things. You can have the longest exhalation time in the world. What good is it if you're not efficiently putting gas in to begin with? And if we are more effective here, you will be more effective at exhalation. You'll be more effective at ventilation and oxygenation. And in lots of cases, you'll be more effective at actually removing gas trapping, which kind of sounds weird because you're like, well, wait a minute, why am I going up on the eye time when I have gas trapping? Well, that's because now that you are more efficient on the inspiratory side of things, that gas now can move out better. You will actually there. You know, when you talk about PEEP and mean airway pressure, you also have to consider airways resistance. The airways resistance of the lower airways there, remember, resistance is the greatest impedance to effective delta P delivery with high frequency, right? Okay, so if the airways are stented open, and I've got the right timing down to deliver the gas, then my gas can get out. If my airways are smaller and resistance goes up, not only are we making it more difficult for the jet gas and pressures to get down here, but we're making it more difficult for the gas that's trapped to get out. But if we're better and more efficient at delivering, exhalation will follow suit. You know, and so, yeah, it's one of those. So, how do I really apply this then clinically? You know, you have a baby, you have a high CO2, you keep cranking up the jet pip, and if it ain't working, go to the eye time. It's really that simple. That's what I'm saying. If you, yeah, I probably would have, yeah. Kind of, and the thing is too is, this is just in general, but just in general, you get the jet pips in like the high 30s, certainly in the 40s. I start thinking about the eye time. Okay, I start thinking about maybe this is the time constant issue. Rule out that it's not a lung volume problem. Rule out that it's not exhalation or atelectasis. Rule out these other things there too. Other than that, because my thing is this also. Listen, you know, you're at 37/9. You should be blowing the heck out of the kid. His CO2 should be 12, but it's not. And you keep going up and you keep going up on the jet pip and it's not working. You keep going up on the jet pip and the servo's not changing. We learned that today. Watch the servo. That's your first clue right there that it's not a driving pressure issue, but rather it might be a time issue. We have to allow enough time for this gas to be done where it needs to go. So for those kids that you have those problems with, I wouldn't hesitate at all to go up on the jet eye time. You know? And of course, you can always call us on the hotline. We're always happy to help out. Myself and a few others. We're the ones that are always on all the time. And just give us a rundown of the kid and we'll talk about whether it sounds like a good idea or not, you know, or other things that we can try. But I don't want anybody to be afraid of it. I certainly don't. I want us to understand why you would want to do it. And I certainly don't want people to think that the sky is falling just because we do it, you know. This is understanding, especially like this chart here, gives you a very clear understanding. But I also created another chart that kind of gives a unique perspective to all of this. Here we are at 0.02, you know, 20 millisecond eye time, blah, blah, blah. But do you realize that at your standard default settings, you only spend 8 seconds out of 1 whole minute in inspiration? That's only a 14, so out of 1 minute, you only spend 14% of your time in 1 minute in inspiration when you're on the jet, at default, eye time rate. But if I go to 0.026, people are like, oh, the sky is falling, we're at 0.026. If you go to 0.026, oh my gosh, we actually spend 11 seconds? Heaven forbid. And I only go to 18%. See, it's a big deal because you're adding 30% more inspiratory time. That's a big deal. You're delivering more volume. That's a big deal. But what you think you lose, exhalation time, is really not that big. And I like this. I like to step back a lot of times to look at a big global, much more global perspective than just zeroing in on the details. And yeah, your home's going to, and even if I max the jet out at 0.034, I'm only spending 14 seconds out of 1 whole minute. So it's not as much as I think sometimes we make it out to be.
Hey Keith, going back to that servo pressure,
Yeah.
after speaking with Jason, we're going to add that onto the staff notes for the staff pronouns. So you guys will have better visual cues about what the servo pressure is on the pronouns staff. Yeah, so kind of help with that a little bit. Yeah.
So, we've gone over a heck of a lot today, but really just kind of put it all together. And if you sit back and go back to the fundamentals and go back to the basics, when you're having trouble, you will always do good. You always do well. The big thing about setting PEEP, it's really about math. Concentrate more on the mean, target mean airway pressures with your patients. Understand the relationship here that, PEEP is your primary control for mean, and sure, means based on jet settings. The jet puts in about 3 at default and all that type of stuff, or we change the eye time, that affected the mean a little bit, like in your patient there, but overall, just keep going back to the mean there. Be as gentle on the lung recruitment breaths as much as possible. Not a high pressure fast, but maybe a lower pressure, but over a longer period of time. That might be what we need to get the job done. Ventilation, of course, is a delta P thing. Yes, jet PIP is your primary control for CO2, but keep in mind that as you adjust PEEP up, you shrink your delta P actually. So that's why it's a delta P issue, not necessarily just a PIP issue. But because of your delta P and your therapy, keep track of the servo pressure. When you hit that sweet spot, know what that servo pressure is. Hey, 2.8, awesome chest wiggle. That's what this baby needs. That should be part of like the blood gases. That should be part of our report to one another. It should be, hey, yes, I got this kid. Here's the settings he's on. You know what? He likes a servo of 2.8. That's where I got good chest wiggle. That's what he likes. That should be part of your assessment and part of your report to one another. Now, I will say this with the servo. It's also dynamic on the patient. Like you have to be as dynamic as he is as far as repositioning, like from supine to prone. You're going to have a different servo pressure because you change. Left side up versus right side up. So if supine, the servo is 2.8. You flip them over prone, the new servo is 2.6. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong. It just means that's your new baseline because we reposition the patient. So we do have to kind of keep that in mind too. But the rate is all about X-ray and exhalation times. Don't chase the CO2 with the rate. And then if everything else is kind of failing, especially with using the jet PIP to control CO2, and you get to that point, consider changing the jet eye time. And the reasons why you would do it should match up exactly with the baby that we're kind of taking care of there. And it's the jet's a wonderful thing. The jet's a very unique ventilator that gets the job done, but it doesn't get the job done without you guys pushing the buttons and turning the knobs and thinking about how to use it the best. But then sometimes it is the tools that get the job done too, because the jet is so different than anything out there. Being a generalist, not a literalist, is kind of one of my little boxes I like to get on. Okay, lowering the jet rate is good when you're overinflated. It doesn't mean go to 240 on every patient. If you have a headache and I tell you to take some Advil, don't take the whole bottle. That's kind of what you're after. So the idea of managing expectations of the baby you're taking care of and how big he is or how premature he is, especially, and combining kind of these two things is I think incredibly important here. Realizing that a lot of times for our babies, you get to a happy spot, don't do anything. Leave well enough alone sometimes, and that type of thing. So, yeah. And And of course, you guys know that we always got your back and we're always here for you, you know. We're always on the hotline, of course, as I talked about earlier, but on our website, we put like these slides and presentations and lots of handouts and lots of material all on our website. Our website's mobile phone friendly too, and so you can always have your pocket-sized guide, quick management, quick startup guide, all that stuff right there. You know, and of course, anytime that you would like for me to come back through here and do some more classes like this, I'm more than happy to. Or case studies. I think case studies are most powerful, you know, because then we can pull up the X-rays and we can look at these babies, you know, day by day or you know, period by period, and really develop a strategy for, you know, how we here at Bunnell take care of those babies. I can talk all day about how other people take care of babies, but let's turn the mirror on ourselves and see what we do here well, and see what maybe we could do a little bit better. And that's one of the things I love about case studies. So you may always get a hold of me and try to find time for me to come back. I love coming here and hanging out with you guys.
Can you talk a little bit about, you know, weaning off the jet? Like, does
Yeah.
everybody need the right jet? Should we lower them on everybody, or can the kid just come right off of them? Like, what's
Yes and no and all the things. It's more of an art. It's more of an art than a science. Weaning is. Stick to the basics. As CO2 improves, just wean the jet pip down. But in addition to weaning the jet pip, you can lower the jet rate and let the babies just start to assume more of his own manipulation responsibility that way. You don't have to. I've extubated plenty of kids straight to non-invasive on a rate of 420. As oxygenation improves and you get to the point with your FiO2 that you feel comfortable lowering down, what I like to look for is I want my mean airway pressure to certainly get down below 10. You know, ideally, probably more like 9 or so. So I say I haven't done it at 10. It's just saying that, because then by the time you pull the tube, the resistance of the ET tube, work of breathing the baby, so work on that. Throw them on non-invasive CPAP settings or high flow. You know, that'd be fine. But looking at his like how much is he spontaneously breathing over the jet? You know, if he's breathing a lot and we're at these really low jet settings and it's causing havoc with the alarm. So for the RTs and the nurses at the bedside, the alarms are driving us nuts and the servo is up and then it's down and then it's up. He's telling you kick the tube out. That's what he's saying. You know, that's kind of thing. You know, and that's where just sitting back, I think, and looking at the picture as a whole and just kind of saying how much support is the jet actually doing? You know, especially as CO2 improves and you start to wean your PIP down, of course, your servo pressure will start to decrease because your delta P is much smaller there too. But then you kind of get to the point to where is the jet really doing anything at all? You know, I'm at a jet PIP of 18. My servo is like less than 2. It's probably not doing anything, you know. But as we know, every now and then our kids get tired, and then all of a sudden CO2 goes up again, and you're gonna have to chase them. That's just, they'll get tired of breathing on their own over the jet, and then you'll have to bump that jet pip back up to 24 to keep his CO2. But then when he wakes up and starts breathing again, we'll just kind of wean that back down, and you will play that roller coaster game. So I think the key thing that I look for primarily, though, is the mean airway pressure, getting that down to you know, just about 9 or so. Just pull the tube. So your PEEP level will be, you know, probably 6. Pull the tube.
Yeah, so there's been a perception into both hospitals that babies fail when you just extubate them legit. So we wondered if, and maybe should be working the line conventional for a while before they'll extubate. And so we wondered if we wean the jet rate and then we wean more on that line for a while, if maybe we would be considered.
Absolutely. It's the clue. It's the clue to take it. I won't say slow and steady, but just one step at a time. You know, and when I get that jet pip down, okay, so how low can you go on the pip? I don't know. Every kid's different. You know, for me, when I get that jet pip about 10 or so above my PEEP level, you're getting to the point where the jet's not doing too much. Maybe 8 above, weaning the rate. So as another tool, you're down at a rate of 300. That's a 1 to 9 IE ratio. So think about it. 1 part inhalation, 9 parts exhalation. And your 1 part inhalation is only 0.02 seconds. Your baby's spending the vast majority of its time on CPAP already, right? Intubated CPAP, but CPAP already. And so, yeah, taking them down maybe to 240. And let
Extubated at 420.
but I've got no problem extubating at
Yeah,
420.
I mean,
So I don't, and so this is a scenario where there's not a sheet, there's not a cookie cutter algorithm that we can follow. There just really isn't. There's no basis for it. I've extubated kids off of jet pips in the mid-20s and stuff. You know, but you know, but lowering the jet rate down, things like that. Those are things that can certainly help. You know, I would much prefer to stay on the jet a day or two longer, weaning the rate down and stuff like that, than go to a conventional. Then you're on a conventional for a week and a half before you try. And then especially if you go to the conventional and you're at a rate of 30 and all this type of stuff, that's not the good trade. You know, it's not what we're after. And so, but just stick to the basics. Once you get wean the CO2 as wean the PIP as CO2 allows you to, and when you get that PIP down to about 10, 8 above your peak level, then start looking at the rate if the rate's not already low, and but also realize that right now he's breathing on his own pretty good, but in a couple of hours he'll get tired. He'll have to go back and bump that jet PIP back up just to maintain his CO2. And it's not, well, he's getting worse, or no, that's just he got tired, and we have to chase him. And then tomorrow he'll start doing it again. We'll wean everything down again. You know, that's the way I kind of approach it there. So it's not a clear defined thing. It's more just gut feeling and intuition and experience and just feeling it out. But I definitely don't think that we, in some cases I know you do, but you shouldn't have to go conventional. I mean, jets and oscillators, they're CPAP. It's CPAP with a wiggle. So just go from intubated CPAP to non-invasive CPAP or high flow or whatever. It's just definitely more of an art.
When you talk about the peak earlier, about, don't be fearful of higher peaks,
Yeah.
9, 10, 11, 12. In your experience, do you see any cardiac compromise as the peak keeps going up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the point is the limit at which you stop is just dependent on the baby.
Mm-hmm.
You're on a PEEP of 11, you go to 12, boom, heart rate goes up, blood pressure drops. Okay, that's your limit.
The boundaries for that.
Right. And so you found the limit for him. Now, if you need more mean air rate pressure, but you've maxed out on PEEP, that's where that background strategy can come into play. Right. Because then I'm only compromising things hemodynamically during my inspiratory time, which is a half second times 5 times a minute, right? But that's a way that I can supplement. So if I'm taking care of like a pulmonary edema patient or pleural effusion type kid where I kind of run into that problem, that's a strategy that I'll employ when I don't feel that I can go up any more on my PEEP.
So start manipulating the conventional band to get the mean air rate pressure up.
Keep the PIP low, but have that longer I time, half second, maybe even 1 whole second. But so that one time it's under the curve for 1 second, sure, things, perfusion might be compromised, but then I've got the rest of the time where it goes back down, but I've got my higher mean, and I think we can't get, you have to understand that to get a mean of 15, you're going to be on a PEEP of 12. That's just what it is. That's not, and that's the hard part is, I think is turning that knob to 12 on such a small baby. Yeah, if that's what you need, then that's what you need, because if he was, but my point also too, again, I got to kind of go back to like an oscillator where this is why I love an oscillator. It's so cool. It doesn't tell you what the PEEP is. It doesn't tell you what the PIP is. You don't want to know. I'm telling you, you don't want to know that stuff. That's why I love it. But you have no problem of him being on a mean of 15 on an oscillator, right? No problem. So why are you worried about a mean of 15 on the jet? Well, because I got to turn the PEEP to 12. See, now you're not looking at the big picture. That's the hard part with using the jet, is that PEEPophobia, and that kind of idea of the idea of 10 sounds like a lot. Yeah, but if your mean air pressure is only 13, what are you worried about? And so that hemodynamic compromise is is my limit. But I have to let the baby tell you that. It might happen on that baby at 9. It might happen at 11. It might happen at 13. I don't know. You don't know. But I know that that's what that's what's going to tell me when I've had enough, or when he's had enough. You know. And so it's definitely I don't know if the word is scary, but it's kind of scary sometimes to think about it. Gee, amount of people 11. Yeah. But that's what he is. You know. So that to me that's where I draw the line. It's not a hard number. It's the effect on the patient. All righty. Any other questions? I mean, I'm here all afternoon, so we can chat all afternoon. As far as my CAM test and everything I wanted to go through, I'm done. So. Oh yeah, adding the rate and then taking it off.
Yeah. But is that just when you talk about one from conventional to?
Oh, it's anytime.
Anytime?
Anytime you're on the jet.
Okay, then you have to explain until you do that.
Okay. All right, so we're on
Because no matter
the
what.
optimizing peak. Okay. So we know that we got Alexis and to get the lung volume back. Recruitment. Is it mixed? Is it mixed with Alexis too? Yeah, that's the key part, because now we're dealing with this nightmare non-homogeneous disease process.
650 grams.
But atelectasis is something that can acutely be fixed in a relatively short period of time. The gas trapping and the hyperflation is a long-term strategy. But you're overinflated over here, but you got white out over here. Or wait, right upper lobe. Every baby gets right upper lobe alexis. Let's play this game. Right upper lobe. Okay, so optimizing P. You turn the background rate on. You have the lung recruitment breaths. Sats improve. Things are awesome. So right there, that tells you a couple things. One, you've recruited some lung volume back. Two, look at the mean airway pressure on the jet. It may just be a half centimeter. It might be 1 full centimeter higher. I don't know. But he likes that. Okay, so you recruit the lung, you turn the rate off, and you go back to CPAP. Yes or no question, do your sats drop? That's it. Just watch your sats. If your sats drop because you went back to CPAP, what is that telling you? It means the mean or PEEP, PEEP is not high enough. It means our baby's responding to recruitment. The problem is that we're allowing de-recruitment after that. So you recruit the lung, turn the rate back on again, go back to your rate of 5, recruit the lung back again, but now tweak your PEEP up by 1. Now, when you go back to CPAP and you turn that rate off, the SAT should say the same.
So in most babies do not have the backup rate on.
Optimally, we want CPAP.
Okay, so we could just put it on. See, I think that's part of it.
Especially with the
We
PIE.
are having the
I think we just start out without anything.
Like it's meant to be a temporary
So after you suction or.
temporary lung recruitment.
You put it on for a little bit and then you turn it off. And we're keeping it on all the time.
And that's part of the thing is those are large volumes going in. That's the way you got to look at the conventional. Okay, how dangerous they are depends on what PIP we choose and things like that. But those are large volumes going in. So you break it down very simply. Does my baby need large volumes going in? No, he's overinflated. He's got PIE. Only if you have atelectasis. Only if we need to recover him after a suction, or even just after an A and B spell, he just kind of dumps on you. You need to recover him back a little bit. That's great. Turn the background rate on. Temporarily. 10 minutes, 15 minutes.
Does that having that backup rate in place, is that a prophylactic atelectasis? Or it could be?
That's how we're.
Yeah.
But PEEP, yeah, PEEP is
And
the
then we get
prophylaxis.
PIE, and then we're like,
PEEP is the prophylaxis to atelectasis. That's what I'm talking about. It is to atelectasis. You know, that's, but and that's what's And that's what's scary is that you're looking at an X-ray and you have PIE. And so you're like, well, it's going up on PEEP. You're afraid to go up on PEEP because I'm looking at this X-ray. PEEP didn't cause the gas trapping. It didn't cause the hyperinflation. That's gas going in that can't get out, right? That's a PIP problem. That's a not enough exhalation time problem. And that's I've got a too much of a premature baby problem. Okay, and I can't do much about that. Okay, but what is the first setting we always want to turn down? PEEP, turn PEEP down. So it goes back to what we talked about earlier. We turn PEEP down, airways get smaller, resistance goes up. Now you're making it harder for the gas that's trapped to actually get out.
So there's this big push, but we're always trying to turn them back. Always trying.
And that's
big
fine.
push. But to a point, but then we get to seems like we're turning it down, and then.
But then it all just goes.
Yeah, then I don't
Have a compromise with the FiO2. Like you're sitting pretty at 40%. If you want to try one less of PEEP, bring to me, that's great. But say, okay, if I go to 50%, it's not worth the trade. I've always just used 10% as my buffer. Or if you want to stretch it to 60, I don't know. But have that in your mind. Say, yeah, it's not worth going to 100% FiO2. It's not worth going to 80%. It's not worth going to 60. So whatever that FiO2 is, let's have a compromise. If the kid can handle the lower mean airway pressure, awesome, great. But if the stats start to drop and you now need 10% or more FiO2, then to me that's not worth the trade.
What if we already have like bad PIE already there? Should we try and sacrifice lower mean airway pressures? I mean,
for higher FiO2
and higher FiO2s.
I don't believe so. Coming from my mouth, in my humble opinion. Yeah, no, I don't believe so. I would want to. We talked about this a little bit earlier, Steve. Double check with the vents in every setting that you're optimized. Double check that you're on the low rate. Double check that you're not on a vacuum rate, that you're on CPAP. Double check. Once you've gone through the list and said, no, I have the right strategy dialed in, then I strongly feel that you sit back and you let it work. It will just take time, okay? But there's no knob, there's no button, there's no ventilator, there's no nothing that you can put on that all of a sudden that PIE is resolved and by tomorrow morning you've got 8.5 ribs.
Yeah, I don't expect to be resolved overnight.
But
within time. What's that?
Start your own brother doing heliox with the jet. Yeah. Well,
But there again, maybe if we don't even have the background rate on at all, we can prevent a lot of this stuff and going to heliox and things like that. So if we start off and not even have it on, hopefully we.
So that is the nursing in our communication too. Then the nurses need to have better communication, like, hey, Steve, I just it's been hard.
Exactly.
Do the backup read.
I did.
Right.
But the key like with the optimizing mean and mean is using it for those 10 minutes, turning it off, and then what do your sats do? That tells you what to do. What do your sats do after you turn it off? If stats stay good and acceptable, awesome, do nothing. But if they drop after you turn the back off, all that's saying is you don't have enough PEEP. So turn the rate back on for a few minutes, recruit the lung back again, but then increase PEEP by 1. Now turn the rate off, but now you're at 1 higher PEEP than you were before. Watch your sats. And so,
does that mean you don't have enough PEEP or enough mass? Well, I know PEEP influences that, but
yeah, I think it's both. I think it's both because MAP is the big picture, but PEEP is the lowest component of positive pressure that we give. And MAP is influenced by everything, by all the other settings too, jet settings, conventional, whether I'm using a rate or not, or how.
But PEEP is the biggest driver.
PEEP is the biggest driver. Okay. So that's where they are married together.
I see what you're saying.
But yet, and that's the thing with PEEP, that kind of goes back to your question, like how high is too high? PEEP is the lowest and safest form of positive pressure we give, right? It's a static form of positive pressure. It's not dynamic. I've never understood why we're so afraid of it. The damage going into the lungs, that's a PIP issue. That's a delta P issue. That's large pressure swings and volume swings. That's not. PEEP keeps the lungs safe. You know, what I worry about PEEP is when people start turning it down, and okay, you get atelectasis. Atelectasis doesn't hurt. It's reversing the atelectasis that creates lung injury. Atelect trauma.
We do that on our oscillators all the time. We and once we get down to 7 or below, man, atelectasis way back up. Okay, days and days, you got to start all over. Okay, and then you got to try new things. So
yeah, and so like even for like these little kids, this was a good discussion I had last month. With the tiny babies that we're saving now, we of course are using a 2.5 ET tube. I have it referenced somewhere on my laptop, but to overcome the mechanical resistance of a 2.5 ET tube, you have to apply 4, if not 5 centimeters of PEEP just to overcome the mechanical resistance of the tube. Yeah. So now think, that's just the tube. So what do I need physiologically for the patient? 4? Okay, well then your PEEP's 8. So for a little 25-weeker, a normal PEEP is 8. You know, and it's kind of funny because with those little kids, because of the ET tube, you will actually be on higher settings than if they were just intubated with a 3.0. Just because of the resistance. Just because of the ET tube. Same kid, same lungs, same jet settings, or in order to get, you will actually have to be on higher jet settings with the 2.5 ET tube because of the resistance. You'll have to be on a higher jet PIP because the resistance of the tube dampens that applied pressure so much. And you'll have to be at a higher PEEP because of, and if all we did was put a 3.0 in the kid, you would actually be on less. You know, theoretically you'd be on less. Well, it's true because I've seen it. But no, that's not what I'm saying. I think the point goes back to the point I was making earlier about managing expectations. Just because he's a 25-weeker and weighs 600 nothing grams doesn't mean that he can't be on a PEEP of 8 or PEEP of 9. He can. That's probably what we need. That's kind of what it's jumping into. The details of it all is something that we often overlook. And that's why I just love and appreciate you guys' time today and the discussions that we've had to go over some of this stuff. It'll make us better at the bedside. It'll make us more efficient. We'll be smarter about the decisions we make now. Now when I change that jet PIP, I know to watch the servo. And if the servo doesn't change, for me as an RT, if I change that PIP by 2 and the servo doesn't change, I'm turning around to my provider team and saying, hey, I made that PIP change, but you know what? Servo didn't change it. Can I go up by a couple more so that I can actually get the servo to change? And I don't have to wait an hour for a blood gas to go down. I don't have to wait. These types of things here will just be incredibly more efficient at point of care and getting these kids taken care of sooner and hopefully extubated sooner too. Yeah. Awesome. I appreciate your time.
That's fantastic, Keith. Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys making it.
It's
what was it?
yeah, we need to docs.
Maybe tomorrow?
Especially
Well, we need Hawaii.
Keith, can you go to Hawaii?